So amending the agenda, if you attend the Open Government Summit in January, you'll hear us talking about how important this is. And I put this here just because you'll hear about amending the agenda. This is one of the few situations in the open meeting law where school committees are treated differently than all other public bodies. All other public bodies can amend their agenda at any point, even at the meeting. School committees operate under different rules. School committees cannot amend their agendas after the 48 hours. So within 48 hours of a meeting, that's the last point where school committees can amend their agenda. So there's a provision in the Open Meeting Act for amending your agenda because you're posting notice probably 48 hours before the meeting anyway. This almost becomes, for lack of a better word, superfluous or nullity. The reason for that is the way the Open Meeting Act has been amended over the years. School committees used to never be able to amend their agendas, and in addition to some of the other posting requirements, had to post notice in a newspaper. But now school committees only have to post notice as all other public bodies do. You can amend your agenda, but that has to be done within 48 hours. And you see what has to be done to amend your agenda. You basically have to repost your notice within the two locations that we'll talk about: the Secretary of State's website, your school committee's website, and some of these other requirements. And the hands are just flying up.
Why are school committee members the only body? Why are we so
Over the years, I've heard different theories on this. I don't know what the answer is. As I said, the way the Open Meeting Act used to read was that school committees had to post notice in addition to these other places in a newspaper. And when you had to post newspaper notification, obviously, well, it's money, but for purposes of what we're talking about right now, the time frame, you had to establish what your agenda would be, whatever it is, a week in advance. Well, that's why they added that you could amend your agenda within 48 hours. So it made at least some sense at that point. But now there's no longer the newspaper requirement to post. So you're now posting your notices 72, 48 hours before a meeting. And the way it still is having this here. I think there was a proposal maybe a year ago to eliminate this and make school committees consistent with all the other public bodies. And it may happen at some point, but it hasn't happened yet. It has to be posted more than 48 hours, I think is the way to say it. More than 48 hours, yeah. One of the other points where the Open Meeting Act differs with school committees and other public bodies, and again, this is very slightly in this respect, is public comment. There's no requirement that any public body have public comment, and all public bodies that decide to have public comment, again, except for school committees, can do so just by responding to members of the public during a properly posted open forum. The way that school committees differ, and it's rather slight, is that the public has to submit the request in writing. There's really no definition of what that means. I presume you could probably have on the podium a sign-in sheet or something to that effect. I don't think it has to be very cumbersome. But if you're going to have public comment at a school committee, the member has to submit the request in writing. It has to be by a member of the public. It has to be during the public comment session of the properly posted agenda and for informational purposes only, which means your school committee can respond to those comments that are initiated by a member of the public, but they can't take any action. And this is the opportunity for the public to provide comment and for members of the school committee to provide responses based on that comment. This is not an opportunity, and we've had findings that this is not an opportunity for school committee members or other members of public bodies to initiate discussion on items that are not on the agenda. So this doesn't give members of the school committee an open forum to discuss whatever they want to discuss. That still has to be on the agenda.
Yes, back to the other one, amending the agenda. This is my 13th year, and I ask this every year. Who makes these laws? Is it the General Assembly?
General Assembly makes the laws.
And the General Assembly doesn't have to obey any of these laws. They're not helping in this.
Well, I'm not sure if that's true or not. There was a determination back under Attorney General Whitehouse that for constitutional reasons, because the legislature is a constitutional branch, that they had different rules. Whether that still applies or not, that's a different issue.
I ask our representatives every year, the school committees of all bodies should be able to amend their agenda. And I know that you can't vote on it, of course, like everybody else, I agree with that. But I think we should try to get that changed.
Yeah, and you know what I would say to that question or to that comment is, to the extent that you believe that whether it's the open meeting law or any law doesn't work for you or should be amended or you have a different take on it, you certainly have it within your right, not just as a school committee member, but as a citizen, to bring that to your representative's attention. I don't want to put Tim on the spot too much, but I think Tim had been part of the trying to get the amending the law provision amended. He shakes affirmatively. That school committees can't amend their agenda within 48 hours. Right.
In Lincoln, we have 2 opportunities for public comment. So if someone wishes to comment on an item that is on the published agenda, then they sign in when they come in, and they can address the committee on a point on the agenda prior to its discussion. So it's early in the meeting. At the end of the meeting, anybody who wishes to bring comment to the committee can do so, and we do not respond. Typically, we don't respond anyway. Somebody may provide a piece of information, but we don't get into a conversation. Is that appropriate?
Which part? The not responding part, or
So that
or the double? Okay.
The way we divide it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I really haven't heard that before, and I think it probably is. I haven't really seen that in another situation, so I'm starting to think it through. But so the reason why the general public comment, the one that you have at the end, has to be under the properly posted notice, under the public comment section, is because members of the public can bring up any agenda item that's not on the any item that's not on the agenda. So if you're having public comment or allowing the public to talk about items that are already on the agenda, to me that doesn't seem, it's already on the agenda. There's already a notice to the public that there's going to be a discussion of that amongst the committee members. You're just opening that up also to the members of the public, so I don't really see that as an issue.
So, and that's that first one.
That's the first one.
The first one is so that people have an opportunity
Yep.
to provide information on a point that we're going to make a decision on.
Right.
That second one is for people who sit through a 2-hour meeting and have something of concern that they want to bring to the committee's attention.
Yeah, I don't see
and
that as a violation.
Not a violation. So it's an appropriate way to handle that.
I don't see that as a violation. And you said that for the first part, they have to sign into?
Yes, they sign in indicating that they wish to address the committee on a point
I don't
that's
see
on
that
the
as a
agenda.
violation.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So voting. Voting is permissible in executive session. I mentioned the first one where it says discussions, and there's some other points in the Open Meeting Act where it also says discussions. That's not permissible. But when voting is permitted in executive session, you can vote. But upon reconvening into the open session, you have to disclose your vote, except where disclosure would jeopardize any strategy, negotiation, or investigation that was undertaken during the executive session. Okay, so otherwise, but for that exception, you do have to disclose your executive session votes.
I had a question, if we could go back to the other slide. One more. The second point you make, member of the public. My district is in Situate. Say someone from Providence comes to talk. Is that a violation or anything, or is that all right?
It's the public, so
Is
whether they're in Situate or Providence or anywhere, or Bedford, Massachusetts.
Okay, so
there's no restriction for them to do so. I've seen points where public bodies will limit discussion to their constituents, their city, or their district. I don't think that violates the Open Meeting Act. Whether that gets into a First Amendment issue, that's a whole different issue. And I think that's a bigger issue than the open meeting law, but that's, I'm not going to offer that opinion. That's outside the scope of the open meeting law.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So 2 types of notices. You have to post, for all of your meetings, there's going to be 2 types of notice. The first is annual notice. Has to be posted at the beginning of each calendar year. We're a couple of weeks away from January. At the beginning of the calendar year, your public body is going to post their annual notice of when they regularly meet, whether it's the first Monday of every month or whatever it is. That's your annual notice. You're also going to post supplemental notice, which is a minimum of 48 hours before every meeting. You're going to post notice for that specific meeting. The posting for the supplemental notices have to be done at the principal office of the public body, one other prominent location within the governmental unit, and electronically by the Secretary of State, on the Secretary of State's website. For the annual notice, I would probably follow the same thing. I think there's an argument to be made that there's no requirement to have the posting at the principal office and the one other location, but I would probably just follow the same thing just to keep yourself safe. What has to be on these notices? You see that for the annual notice, it's the date, time, location of the meeting, of the regular scheduled meeting, has to be also available to the public upon request. Your supplemental notices, date, time, location of the meeting, date posted, and we'll talk about the underline because that gets to be an issue about how specific your notices have to be, but a statement specifying the nature of everything that's going to be discussed or each topic that's going to be discussed. So here's some examples, and I guess let me just go back for a second. Statement specifying the nature of the business to be discussed. The Rhode Island Supreme Court has said that that means that you're going to, there's no hard and fast rule of what that means, but that you have to provide notice that would apprise the public of the nature of what's going to be discussed or what's going to be acted upon. There was a case called Analec from a couple years ago where one of the zoning boards put on that they were going to talk about a specific correspondence. The Rhode Island Supreme Court said, well, that violated the Open Meeting Act because you ended up talking about a property that was discussed in the notice or in the correspondence. You didn't indicate that the discussion of the property, where that property was located, anything of that nature. So the safe thing is to be more specific rather than less specific.